There is a kind of soul that doesn't need the noise to feel alive. There are hearts fashioned by heaven to find peace in stillness, strength in silence, and beauty in the hidden place called home. This is not laziness. This is not fear. This is sacred. For some, the house is not just a shelter. It's a sanctuary. The walls of a quiet room often echo louder with truth than the loudest crowd. But with this love for solitude comes truth, sharp truths that will both comfort and confront. Because if you love staying home, it means something deeper is at work in your spirit. It is not just a preference. It is often prophetic. You have chosen the narrow gate, not of seclusion, but of sensitivity. You are not isolated. You are insulated by heaven for a reason. There are 7 truths that follow those who choose the quiet life, the hidden life, the life of the homeward soul. These truths will not flatter you, but they will find you. They will stretch you, stir you, and call you deeper. Because the calling to dwell inward is not a dismissal from the world. It's a divine appointment in it. So listen not with your ears alone, but with the chamber of your heart. For these truths are not for the crowd, but for the called. Stillness exposes what noise tries to hide. In the quiet, there is nowhere to run. The silence becomes a sanctuary for some and a furnace for others. When the clamor of schedules, conversations, notifications, and obligations cease, a deeper sound emerges. The sound of your own soul. And that sound cannot be muted with entertainment or silenced with business. It speaks in truth, even when it speaks in discomfort. Many people fear stillness not because it is empty, but because it is full of the thoughts they've pushed away, full of the feelings they've buried, full of the convictions they've delayed. When you are still, you are introduced to yourself again, and that confrontation can be the most sacred war you ever fight. Stillness is the environment of revelation. It doesn't introduce new problems, it reveals the ones you kept postponing. When noise covers you, it makes you feel safe. It distracts from the ache, muffles the whisper, and gives you the illusion that movement equals meaning. But meaning has never been found in motion alone. It's found in being rooted. And rootedness only comes when you are still enough to let the truth dig its way through the surface of your soul. When you love staying home and sitting in the stillness, it's not that you're passive. It's that you've begun to see the weight and wonder of what hides beneath the noise. The world rewards the loud, the rushed, the busy, but heaven often meets those who are willing to stop. Stillness becomes the language of maturity. Children cry in chaos, but those who've grown in the spirit have learned to listen in silence. When everything grows quiet, what remains is what is real. You no longer have the stage to perform. No one is watching. It's just you, your breath, your thoughts, and your creator. And what's most remarkable is how much begins to move once you become still. Your mind slows down, but your discernment sharpens. Your pace quiets, but your spirit wakes up. Stillness doesn't shut down your life. It awakens the parts that noise kept asleep. The wounds you thought healed come to the surface. The prayers you abandoned return to your lips. The dreams you buried start to stir again. Stillness is not a void, it is a visitation. The people who live in noise tend to numb their senses, but stillness revives them. You begin to notice the presence of God in subtle things. The creak of the floorboards, the rhythm of the rain, the warmth of the sunlight on your wall. These moments that feel insignificant become sacred, because stillness gives you eyes to see what was always there, waiting for your attention. You stop craving miracles, because you've discovered that presence is the greater miracle. Not fire falling from heaven, but a heart awakened on the inside. Noise hides fear. It conceals insecurity. It masks guilt. It offers the appearance of being productive while robbing you of actual progress. You can be surrounded by activity, but remain unchanged in your soul. But stillness forces you to confront what you're really made of. When no one's clapping for you, will you still worship? When no one sees you, do you still serve? When no voice speaks, do you still trust the last word God gave you? In silence, your faith is refined. It becomes yours, not theirs. It is no longer borrowed from the crowd or inherited from your community. It is rooted in intimacy, not image. There are truths that heaven will only tell you in silence. There are secrets too holy to be shouted. They require stillness. Stillness prepares the soil for divine seeds to be planted. Not every blessing comes in noise. Some blessings are wrapped in a pause. Some callings only surface when your heart is no longer distracted. God is not absent in stillness. He is amplified. But the amplifier is not volume. It is vulnerability. To be still is to be brave, because it is in the stillness that the masks fall off, the performing ceases, the rehearsed prayers fade, and what's left is something beautiful and raw, a soul undressed before its maker. And in that place, transformation becomes possible. Because when you finally stop hiding behind the noise, you discover that God never hid from you. He was waiting in the silence, speaking a truth only stillness could help you hear. The hidden life is not a life of retreat. It is a life of reverence. It is not the absence of movement, but the presence of mystery. It is the life that refuses to shout in order to be seen, because it knows it is already known. The world may applaud the visible, but heaven anoints the hidden. What is most sacred is often what is most secret, and what the crowd overlooks, God often calls his treasure. To be hidden is not to be forgotten. It is to be preserved. There are souls so precious to the purpose of God that he shields them from premature exposure. Not because they're weak, but because they carry something weighty. Just as seeds begin their journey underground, so do many of God's chosen begin theirs in silence, in solitude, in shadow. Before David ever held a crown, he held a harp in the field. Before Esther ever stood before the king, she sat hidden in preparation. The holy is often born in the hidden. The world rushes to be seen. It clamors for visibility, for platform, for likes and followers. But heaven never confuses noise for nearness. Some of the most powerful prayers are whispered in bedrooms, not echoed in sanctuaries. Some of the most faithful servants are never named in history books, yet their names are engraved in eternity. Their offerings may be unnoticed by men, but they shake the heavens with their obedience. Their sacrifice doesn't trend, but it transforms. To embrace a hidden life is to reject the addiction to applause. It is to know that if your only audience is God, it is enough. The holiest life is not always lived on a platform. It is lived at a table in the quiet, in the unseen consistency of surrender. It is not loud, but it is lasting. It may not be praised, but it is powerful. And in the end, it is the hidden work that often holds the world together. The intercessor no one sees, the giver who never demands credit, the servant who washes feet without posting a photo. That is holiness. There is something sacred about doing right when no one is watching, about giving your best not because it will be rewarded publicly, but because God is worthy privately. That kind of devotion cannot be faked. It is formed in obscurity. It is forged in the quiet corners of life where no spotlight shines. It is there, in the hidden places, that purity is protected and character is carved. And oh, how patient the hidden life must be. For there is no rush in heaven. The vine does not shout as it grows. The oak does not demand applause as it deepens its roots. The soul that lives hidden learns to value formation over fame. It learns that God is not in a hurry to present what he is still perfecting. And while the world may see delay, heaven calls it development. To the impatient, the hidden life feels like punishment. But to the faithful, it is protection. Even Christ himself lived in obscurity for 30 years before his public ministry began. 30 years of quiet obedience for 3 years of public impact. What does that tell us about the value of hiddenness? It tells us that heaven is not afraid to wait, that preparation is not a waste, that time spent in silence is never time lost. It is time invested, and often, it is in those silent years that the deepest truths are revealed and the strongest roots are grown. The hidden life is often the holiest life because it belongs to those who live for one voice alone. They do not strive to be celebrated. They strive to be faithful. They do not chase attention. They chase after God. And in their chase, they find him not in the noise, but in the nearness. Not in the stage, but in the secret place. Not in the crowd, but in the quiet. Their lives preach a gospel the world forgets. That intimacy with God is the greatest reward, and if no one ever sees what they do, it is still sacred. Because God sees. To be hidden is not to be buried. It is to be planted. And what is planted in private, in time, will bear fruit that glorifies God in public. Holiness is not loud. It is not showy. It is not interested in being recognized. It is interested in being right before God. And that kind of life, hidden though it may be, is radiant with eternal light. When you withdraw, it does not always mean you are giving up. Sometimes it means God is gearing up. There is a kind of silence that is not surrender. It is strategy. A kind of stepping back that is not weakness, but wisdom. Heaven has a habit of pulling its warriors into hiding, not to sideline them, but to strengthen them. Your withdrawal may feel like isolation, but in the eyes of God it may be the beginning of divine warfare. The battlefield of the Spirit doesn't always look like noise, confrontation, or visible victory. Often, it looks like retreat, at least to those who do not understand the way heaven fights. God does not always send his soldiers forward first. Sometimes he calls them to the back of the line, into the quiet, into the cave, into the secret place. Why? Because some battles are not won by being louder, but by being lower. Not by being seen, but by being surrendered. When you pull away from the chaos, the crowd may misread your silence. They may say you've quit, lost your edge, or grown cold. But the truth is, spiritual battles are not always fought with volume. Sometimes they are fought with vigilance behind closed doors. The fiercest prayers are often prayed through clenched teeth and silent tears. The most dangerous intercessors are not always the loudest. They are the ones who have learned to war in whispers and worship through wounds. To withdraw is to refuse distraction. It is to leave behind the noise so that you can hear the narrow frequency of God's instruction. There are battles that require consecration, meaning a setting apart, a removal from the familiar. When Jesus faced his greatest spiritual tests, he did not invite the crowd. He withdrew. He went to the wilderness. He climbed the mountain. He slipped away while others slept, not because he was avoiding the world, but because he was preparing to confront it. Your withdrawal may look like disappearing, but in the realm of the Spirit, you are not disappearing. You are being deployed. Heaven is not wasting your stillness. It is weaponizing your prayers, sharpening your discernment, and reinforcing your armor. Every time you say no to the distraction and yes to the secret place, you are declaring war on every force that hoped you would stay too busy to break through. Divine warfare doesn't begin when you enter the room. It begins when you enter the place of surrender, when you choose to step away from what demands your energy and focus, instead on what deserves your obedience. Something shifts. Strongholds are weakened, chains are broken, not because you fought harder, but because you listened deeper. The enemy does not fear noise. He fears nearness to God, and nearness is most often found in the quiet, not the chaos. Some of the greatest victories you will ever win will be won in the moments no one claps for, no one sees, and no one even understands. The nights you cry out alone. The mornings you rise early just to hear one whisper from God. The hours spent not producing, but pressing in. These are not throwaway moments. They are the battlefield where the real war is waged, and where heaven begins to move. Even the retreat into silence becomes a form of resistance. It is a refusal to let the world mold you. It is the deliberate act of anchoring yourself in truth while everything else spins in confusion. And though the crowd may not see it, hell notices when you withdraw. The forces of darkness become unsettled when a soul walks away from noise and into presence, because they know this kind of withdrawal is the prelude to something powerful. So don't despise your pulling away. Don't rush to re-enter the places God asked you to step back from. You are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are not inactive. You are in training. You are in alignment. And your posture is not passive. It is prophetic. Your stillness is not apathy. It is ammunition. You may feel hidden, but you are being held. You may feel paused, but you are being positioned. Your withdrawal is not the end of your assignment. It is the escalation of it. And when the time comes, you won't return the same. You'll return with clarity, with oil, with authority, because you didn't run away. You ran into the arms of the one who teaches your hands to war and your heart to wait. There is a sacred difference between punishment and preservation, though to the untrained heart, they often feel the same. When doors close, when silence lingers, When opportunities bypass you, it is easy to assume that something has gone wrong, that you've missed it, that you're being pushed aside. But heaven does not forget its own. What feels like a delay may actually be divine protection. What looks like rejection might be redirection. And the very season you think is punishment might be the season heaven has marked as preservation. Preservation is a quiet mercy. It doesn't always make an announcement. It doesn't ask your permission. It simply acts on behalf of your destiny. When God hides you, it's not to hurt you. It's to hold you. Some things you prayed for would have fractured you if you received them too soon. Some platforms would have exalted your gift while crushing your character. Some relationships would have soothed your loneliness while starving your calling. And so, in His kindness, God said, "Not yet," and maybe even "not ever." It takes humility to believe that God knows better than we do. It takes spiritual maturity to understand that being held back by heaven is sometimes the evidence that you're being healed, shaped, or shielded, and though the season feels still, it is not stagnant. The soil does not punish the seed by covering it. It preserves it from the elements, gives it time to root, and prepares it to bear fruit. But to the seed, it feels like darkness. It feels like isolation. It feels like burial. That is until the breakthrough comes. God does not expose what He has not yet strengthened. He does not release what He has not refined. And so, your current hiding place may be heaven's workshop. You think you've been forgotten, but you're being formed. You think you've been passed over, but you're being passed through a process. He is crafting something eternal in your soul that the applause of man cannot build, and the approval of man cannot sustain. Preservation often comes with loneliness, with the absence of validation, with seasons of misunderstanding, but it also comes with clarity, with depth, with a kind of holy insulation that keeps you from becoming what the world would have shaped you into. In the preservation of God, you are not exposed to every opportunity, every crowd, every voice. Why? Because He is protecting what He's placed inside of you. The world may be loud, but the voice that truly leads you will often whisper. Sometimes God preserves you by slowing your pace. You watch others run ahead, succeed faster, grow larger, and you wonder why your path feels narrow and quiet. But He knows what your spirit can carry. He knows what would tempt your heart, break your focus, or ruin your joy. And rather than give you what you ask, He gives you what you'll thank Him for: later space to breathe, time to mature, and room to heal. Preservation can feel like punishment to the impatient heart. But to the one who has walked with God long enough, it begins to feel like a deep and necessary kindness. A kindness that says, "You matter too much to be rushed." A mercy that declares, "You're not ready for what's next, and what's next isn't ready for you." And instead of pushing you forward, He places you under His wing. You are not in a holding cell. You are in a holy place. In time, the wisdom of this hidden season will make sense. The people who didn't see you will realize what they missed. The moments that felt like setbacks will be revealed as setups, and the silence you hated will be understood as sacred. God wastes no season. If you're not moving, it's because the road is being cleared. If you're not seen, it's because the light is being adjusted. If you're not answered, it's because the next word is still being written. So don't mislabel your season. You are not being punished. You are being preserved. Preserved for the right moment. Preserved for the right mission. Preserved for the version of you that is fully alive, wholly surrendered, and ready to carry the weight of glory with grace and integrity. Heaven has hidden you for a holy reason, and what emerges from this place will not just survive, it will shine. There is a cost to stillness, and part of that cost is being misunderstood. When your soul chooses silence over shouting, rest over rushing, and depth over display, the busy and the loud will not know what to do with you. They measure worth by visibility, value by volume, and purpose by pace. So when you slow down, withdraw, and listen for the whisper, instead of chasing after the noise, you become a mystery they cannot solve, and sometimes a threat they try to dismiss. You will be called passive when you are actually being prayerful. You will be labeled lazy when you are leaning into something eternal. You will be seen as disconnected when in truth you are deeply anchored, because those who live frantically cannot comprehend the power of quiet faith. They confuse motion with meaning. They think productivity is proof of calling. But there is a kind of holy stillness that speaks louder than any platform ever could, and if you choose to live by that stillness, you must accept that many will not understand. It is not because they are cruel, it is because they are conditioned. Conditioned to move fast, to perform, to stay in constant communication with the world, and yet lose touch with their own hearts. They need noise because silence would expose their inner drought. They crave approval because they have never stood still long enough to feel accepted by God. So when you choose the quiet path, the hidden life, the unhurried obedience, they may see your posture as weakness when it is in fact wisdom. They will ask why you are not rushing, why you are not chasing, why you are not climbing the ladders they are sprinting up. And your answer, if you even offer one, will not satisfy them, because peace cannot be explained to someone who has only ever known pressure. They will see your restraint and call it retreat. They will see your discernment and call it doubt. But you are not living for the shout of man. You are living for the sound of God's voice, and that voice is rarely found in the chaos. Remember Elijah. When he ran to the cave, broken and empty, the Lord did not speak to him in the wind, or the earthquake, or the fire. The voice came in a whisper, a still, small voice. And to hear it, Elijah had to step out of the noise and into the hush. So must you. But understand this, when you live by whispers, you will be misunderstood by those who only recognize roars. The busy will wonder why you don't keep up. The loud will wonder why you don't speak up. But the one who has heard from God knows better than to move just because others are moving. Obedience is not always public. Sometimes it is private, patient, and painfully quiet. You are not called to be understood. You are called to be faithful. And often, that faithfulness will look like stillness in a world addicted to speed. Let them misunderstand you. Let them question your timing, your motives, your decisions. Let them assume you are lost while you are being led. God's greatest works are often done in the dark, away from the noise, in hearts too anchored to be swayed by the opinions of man. If they cannot see your foundation, they will misjudge your frame, but you are not building for them. You are building for something that will outlast the storms. Your quietness is not absence. It is alignment. Your slowness is not weakness. It is wisdom. Your hiddenness is not failure. It is formation. And one day what was misunderstood will be undeniable, because fruit speaks. Results reveal. And the peace you carry will preach louder than any sermon ever could. You won't need to explain your path. Your presence will tell the story. So keep walking slowly with the Lord. Keep choosing the quiet obedience. Keep turning down the noise to tune into the truth. Yes, you will be misunderstood by the busy and the loud, but you are being fully understood by the one who called you. And in the end, that is the only understanding that truly matters. There comes a moment when a house is no longer just a structure of walls and windows. It becomes something sacred. It becomes a resting place for the presence of God. Not because incense fills the room or choirs echo through the halls, but because hearts within it have made room for heaven. It is not holy because of decoration, wealth, or size. It becomes holy when the invisible presence of the Almighty makes itself known in the everyday rhythm of life. When your home ceases to be just a shelter and begins to function as a sanctuary, your house has become heaven's habitation, not because you are perfect, but because you've invited Him to stay. Not visit. Stay. It's easy to welcome God for a moment of prayer or a desperate cry in a time of need, but it's something entirely different to invite Him to dwell. Dwell in the dining room where hard conversations happen. Dwell in the silence of your bedroom where doubts sometimes whisper. Dwell in the kitchen where daily bread is prepared in quiet obedience. When the ordinary becomes yielded, it transforms into something eternal. There is a kind of soul that begins to carry reverence in every room, a kind of awareness that this space, though modest, though humble, has been offered to God without condition. And in return, God does what He has always done with yielded places. He inhabits them. He doesn't need a temple made with gold, when he's found one made with surrender. The living room where you pray becomes an altar. The hallway where you pace with wary hope becomes a battlefield of intercession. Even your tears on the floorboards become the ink of prayers written in heaven's language. Most people overlook such spaces. They think holy things must happen in cathedrals, on platforms under lights. But God has never been limited to architecture. He is not drawn to performance. He is drawn to purity. And where there is room for him, he comes. Not like a guest who stays briefly, but like a father who makes himself at home. When the atmosphere of your house is saturated with surrender, love, repentance, worship, and patience, God doesn't just visit. He abides, and where he abides, things begin to change. The atmosphere shifts without explanation. Peace lingers even after the music stops. There's a sense of protection not born from locks or alarms, but from something unseen, something divine. Arguments resolve quicker. Gratitude flows freer. Even the air feels weighted with stillness, not because you've mastered spirituality, but because you've created space. You've built a dwelling place, not with hands, but with habits of holiness. When you begin to sense that your house is hosting something sacred, your choices shift. You stop entertaining things that disturb the atmosphere. You become more careful about what enters your door. Conversations, attitudes, media habits. You begin to realize that your home is not just a physical location, but a spiritual invitation. Heaven has chosen to dwell among you, and that reality begins to inform how you live, how you speak, how you wait, and how you worship. Your home becomes a refuge, not just for you, but for others. People come and say they feel peace and don't know why. Children feel safe. Guests feel seen. Something deeper than decor draws them in. It is the presence of God that resides within your walls. It is the aroma of worship, even in the mundane. It is the effect of having a sacred space not set apart by signs or songs, but by a heart that said to God, "This house is yours." You may feel ordinary, unnoticed, uncelebrated. But the truth is, heaven has marked your dwelling place. The King has entered and made himself at home. Not because of how much you have, but because of how much you've given him access to. That's what makes a house holy. That's what makes it a habitation. And while the world may seek God in stadiums and stages, you've discovered that sometimes the holiest place is a quiet corner of your home where tears fall, prayers rise, and his presence lingers like a gentle wind. Heaven does not need a temple of stone. It needs a table where he's welcome, a heart that listens, and a home that says, "Stay, Lord." And when you say that, he does. And when he does, everything changes. To the world, it looks like you're simply protecting your peace, maintaining your space, keeping your distance from certain people or environments. But beneath the surface, something far deeper is at stake. You are not just guarding a place, you are guarding a presence. Not a concept, not a memory, but the living, breathing reality of the presence of God that has made its home in your life, in your spirit, and yes, even within the quiet walls of your home. Some will not understand your boundaries. They will accuse you of being distant, detached, or overprotective. But what they cannot see is what you've encountered in the silence, what you've wept over in the dark, what you've received in prayer that cost you too much to now allow to be casually handled. You're not guarding your personality. You're guarding the presence that healed you, met you, and now walks with you. And where God's presence dwells, careless access is no longer an option. You've come to know that sacred things demand sacred protection. Not out of fear, but out of reverence. When the Ark of the Covenant was carried, it wasn't treated like luggage. It was carried with trembling hands and specific instructions. Why? Because it was not just a symbol of God. It carried his presence. And now, under the new covenant, your soul, your home, your atmosphere carry something even greater, the indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit. That changes everything. You're not just a host. You are a steward. The cost of presence is discretion. You don't allow everything into your space anymore. Not because you think you're better, but because you've seen what it takes to keep the flame alive. You've discovered that the Spirit speaks more clearly in stillness than in noise. And so, you fight for stillness. You fight for purity, not as legalism, but as loyalty. You've come to know that not all company is compatible with consecration. Not all conversations leave the fragrance of heaven behind. Guarding the presence means watching what you allow through every gate, what you listen to, what you watch, what you entertain. The things that once seemed harmless now feel heavy, not because they're overtly wrong, but because they interfere with the sweetness of communion. You sense when the air shifts. You recognize when compromise knocks, and instead of inviting it in, you choose to protect the presence that has become your everything. You've also learned that guarding the presence will cost you relationships. People may distance themselves. You may no longer be included in certain circles, but the trade is worth it, because you're not living for popularity. You're living for proximity to God. You know what it feels like to lose His nearness through neglect, and you've resolved in your soul never again. You would rather be alone with His presence than surrounded without it. Even your home, once just a physical space, has become an altar. Every room carries residue from encounters no one else saw. Every corner has absorbed intercession that shaped your heart. This is why you guard it fiercely. You know what it's like to invite heaven into your home, and you won't permit anything to trespass against that atmosphere. You're not being dramatic. You're being discerning. There is a difference between entertaining guests and entertaining God. There is a kind of maturity that settles in when you realize presence is not permanent unless it is prioritized. Just as a fire must be fed, so must the awareness of God in your midst be tended. It is not that He leaves, but we stop noticing, and you've decided that your life will be a constant reminder of His nearness. That you will keep the oil flowing, the altar burning, the temple clean, not for display but for delight, because nothing compares to Him staying. So yes, it may seem small, it may seem like you're just guarding your space, but in truth, you're standing watch over a tabernacle, an unseen sanctuary that holds the fragrance of the Lord. And in a world that tramples over sacred things, your refusal to treat His presence casually is not only rare, it is holy. You are not just guarding your home, your heart, or your habits. You are guarding a presence, and that presence is not a feeling, it is a person, a king, a comforter, a friend. And when He finds a life that guards Him well, He stays. And when He stays, everything else begins to align under the weight of glory.